morning.
Morning.
To quote our sister Grace, Blessed Lord's Day. The reading this morning is taken from John 1 through 14. That's page 1645 from the Pew Bibles. John 1 to 14. The Word became flesh. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light, he came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and through the world was made through him. And though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor human decision, or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh, and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Cody, the time's yours.
Good morning.
Morning.
I have some weird facts for you about Christmas. The amount of wrapping paper thrown away each Christmas season can be laid out and equal 384,400 kilometers. In other words, it could reach all the way to the moon. 17 million hours will be spent online shopping Boxing Day. And now some more serious facts. Holiday retail sales for this year are projected to reach $957 billion American in the United States alone. Americans spend approximately $1,000 each on Christmas every year. Surprisingly enough, Canadians spend nearly $1,000 more than Americans. The spending for decades has been shown to increase every year. Now, the last statistics for some of the stuff I could find was 2016, but imagine it increases every year. $61 million is what was spent, the value of all the artificial trees imported in 2016. $5.1 billion was spent on food and beverages at Christmas. $459 million was spent on televisions, audio, and video equipment. $417.8 million was spent on toys, games, and hobby supplies. $274 million on computer hardware and software. I'm sure that's tripled by now. $98.7 million just on stationery, cards, and wrapping paper. Now that was, 7 years ago? It's gone up every year since then, so. Christmas is consumed by consumerism. The ads seem to start earlier and earlier every year. This year I went into a store, Halloween hadn't even happened yet. It was Walmart, and there was already a Christmas section. Kids struggle to find the connection between their Christmas wish list and Jesus' birth. Parents search for even the most fleeting moment of worship in the season. And many of us reach the end of this Advent season of this 4 weeks with just a emptiness. We sift through piles of things that we don't need and probably never will use. And something tells us that we might have missed the point. So here's your invitation to rebel. Last week we started something called the Advent Conspiracy. And it's an invitation to rebel against all that craziness. It's a conspiracy to take back Christmas from consumerism. There were 4 principles we talked about that guide this conspiracy. Worship fully, which we talked about last week. Spend less, give more, and love all. Last week we talked about worshiping fully with your whole heart and your whole life. Not just on Sunday mornings. And this week we're going to do principle 2 and principle 3. Spend less and give more. Spend less. Now, the very first thing we have to realize is that everything we have belongs to God. Psalm 50, through 11 says, I will not accept a bull from your house or goats from your folds, for every beast of the forest is mine, the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know all the birds of the hills, and all that moves in the field is mine. Haggai 2, 7 through 8 says, And I will shake all nations, so that the treasures of all nations shall come in. And I will fill this house with glory, says the Lord of hosts. The silver is mine, and the gold is mine, declares the Lord of hosts. And finally, 1 Chronicles 29, 14. But who am I, and what is my people, that we should be able thus to offer willingly? For all things come from you, and of your own we have given you. Everything comes from God. Everything we can give back to God is His anyway. We are simply stewards of everything we own. Now, how do you think God wants us to spend His money? By buying tons of unnecessary things? Going into debt at Christmas time to buy some gifts? Spending it all so we have nothing left for those in need? God tells us how He wants to spend our things. Romans 12:13, share with the saints in their needs and pursue hospitality. And in Luke 3:11, He replied to them, the one who has 2 shirts must share with someone who has none, and the one who has food must do the same. We are meant to help people with our wealth. And so, part of spending less, part of this principle is balancing desires with the needs in our communities. Should we consider spending a little bit less on our own entertainment and a little more on someone else's necessities this Christmas? Surveys have shown that many kids are actually overwhelmed with the amount of gifts they receive. It reaches a point and it becomes too much for them. They receive so much. Is it really healthy for us to spend all this money to give children absolutely everything they want, plus some extra? What kind of story do we want our spending to tell this season? Christmas should be more about giving what people need than getting what we want. Now, I do have to say, spending less does not mean spending nothing. It is still okay to give gifts. But the point is, we strive to evaluate what we support with our spending. We spend less on undeserving companies and products and allow our spending to instead support products, people, and causes that are worthy of our support. So we need to ask questions about our spending this season. Ask about the community consequences. Are you supporting a business that treats its employees well? Does that business advocate for something you believe in? Do you agree with the way they advertise? Are they using sexual appeal? Do kids see harmful things in these ads? You might even want to consider environmental consequences. We are told to take after the earth. So do the manufacturers use factories that routinely ignore environmental guidelines? Is the product recyclable, reusable? Does it create unnecessary waste? Who is our money supporting? Should we celebrate Jesus' birth by supporting slavery and child labor? Are we supporting dehumanizing practices of corrupt regimes around the world? Are we supporting corporations that exploit their workers and pay them less than a livable wage? As part of spending less, spend more time researching the products you purchase. Maybe even look for something labeled fair trade. It's expensive. But 1 Timothy 5:18 says, "Do not muzzle an ox while it is treading out the grain, and the worker is worthy of his wages." We shouldn't be robbing people with our spending. When we spend freely without regard for where the money ends up, I don't think we're honoring Jesus or his birthday. We're honoring consumerism. We're joining society in accepting greed as the norm. And it is, ironically and terribly, so much more pronounced at Christmas time. We need a change of heart. And the best place for a change of heart this season is at the feet of newborn Jesus. We need to rediscover the beauty of true giving. And that brings us to the third principle. Give more. Now, I know you might be thinking it's strange, he just said spend less, and now he's saying give more. It's a little weird, I know. But stop and think for a second. What is the most memorable gift you have ever received? What touched you most about it? Why do you still remember it to this day? I'm going to go out on a limb and say it probably wasn't a new car or expensive jewelry or something like that. Vern's holding up his Bible.
38 years ago.
Yeah. For most of us, this special gift was a different kind of gift. It was a relational gift. Something personal, something meaningful. Look at God and the way he gives gifts. He gave us his only son. His answer to the world's problems was not more stuff, not to give more wealth, but he did give more. He gave himself. The most priceless and personal gift that has ever been given. That's the beauty of the incarnation. That is what we celebrate this season. The incarnation, the moment when Jesus, the Son of God, entered the world, and our story as a human baby. That's the miracle of Christmas. The infinite becoming finite. An infant fully human and still fully God. Bruce read the beginning of the Gospel of John for us today. And we're going to look at that a little bit more. John 1 through 3. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. All things were created through him, and apart from him, not one thing was created that has been created. Jesus is the Word. Jesus is God. Jesus was with God in the beginning, and Jesus made everything. John 1:14. Let's skip to verse 14. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We observed his glory, the glory as the one and only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. The Word, Jesus, became flesh and lived among us. Chose to become one of us, born as a helpless little baby. The incarnation. And Jesus is our fullest and our best understanding of God. He made the infinite God more tangible, more approachable, more comprehensible, although never fully. He showed us what God is really like. This is the truly relational gift. And everything changed. Without the incarnation, we would never know the depths of God's love for us, not the true extent of it. That is what we celebrate at Christmas, that God gave himself. So what happened when God gave himself, when he gave his Son Jesus? God gave us his presence. Matthew 1:23, we read a quote from the Old Testament that says, his name shall be Emmanuel, God with us. Now we can all say that at Christmas time. Oh, his name was Emmanuel, it means God with us. How many of us actually stop and let that really sink in? God with us. It is a tangible gift, flesh and blood with us. His presence. Talk about a truly relational gift. Give more this season by giving of your time and your presence, like God did. And God's gift was personal. The Gospels show the relational nature of Jesus. He was surrounded by people. And he intentionally cultivated his personal relationships. He spent time with these people. He paid attention to them and to their needs. He listened to them and he noticed what was going on with them. Relational giving, giving more, means paying attention to the other person. Who are they really? And what are the things they care about? And God's gift bridged the gap. Sin separated us from God, and it created a gap that we could never cross. We could not get to God. And so, he came to us. Jesus crossed that gap for us. Is there someone that you can't physically be with this season? Or is there an emotional gap in your relationship? How can you bridge that gap? It takes time and it takes thought. Relational giving like this, personal giving, can be a bit risky. I can think of a time where my dad, he's not a good reader, and he had complained that he didn't know his Bible very well. He couldn't read his Bible. But he wanted to know it better. And so I went and I found the best audio Bible I could find on CD. Dramatized and everything to make it enjoyable so he could listen to it. He never used it. Now, truthfully, that hurt. But it was a relational gift. The intention was to help him. It can be risky, but it's not about the gift giver. It's about the one we're giving the gift to. So, spend less. Spend less money on entertainment so you can spend more on meeting people's needs. Spend less on unworthy businesses and products so you can spend more on worthy things and honor Jesus with your money. Give more. Practice relational giving. Give more of your presence with people. Give more personal, thought-out gifts. Handmade gifts are great. Gifts that involve something important to the person. Maybe there's a charity they really care about. And give gifts that bridge gaps. Some practical suggestions. Just first, get into the habit of asking more questions before spending your money. Even if it's something that person asked for. Set a budget and know your limit. Jesus doesn't want you to go in debt to celebrate his birthday. Consider your core values, your Christian values. Does the spending at Christmas and the rest of the year reflect your Christian values? And before you start buying, consider each person on your list and think about your relationship with them, what significance it brings to your life. Spend less. And give more like Jesus, like God gave. Relationally. You don't have to break the bank for it. I doubt Jesus would want that. I found a beautiful story of someone who did something like this. There were two women who gave their Nana, who they were not able to spend much time with because of distance, and who they couldn't see at Christmas. They gave her a modest but truly precious Christmas gift to celebrate their relationship. It was a large mason jar full of colorful strips of paper, 52 of them to be exact. The instructions were simple for their Nana. At the beginning of each week the following year, Nana was to randomly pull out one of the notes that are written on construction paper. On it, she would find a story handwritten by one or both of her great-granddaughters. The story would recount a time they had spent growing up with her loving care. I remember you walking me around the pond and feeding the ducks, a story might begin. It was a celebration of very personal moments this great-grandma had invested in these two young women. It was also a way to tell her they had not forgotten this relationship. In fact, they told her they too would remember and thank God in the coming year for their Nana as they looked ahead to more face-to-face moments together. Now, to hear this elderly woman tell it, Monday morning became her favorite time of the week. It was a moment of nostalgia, yes, but a time of worship as she was grateful to God for these relationships and for this caring she experienced. Now that was a gift that bridged the gap, a gap of distance. That's an example of giving more, of following Jesus and his example of being personal and relational, following God's example in the giving his Son. So this season, spend less, but give more. That's how we should celebrate Jesus' birth. Spend less and give more.